Alright, so here we are. We are the Geek Philosophers, and we pretty much just review so far movies, but we're going to get onto a bit of TV, some new TV that's out right now on Netflix. We're going to get into Altered Carbon, and what we're going to do is instead of going episode by episode, we're going to review the entire season. We'll probably skim through certain plot points through the season and just kind of comment and whatnot throughout. So I warn you that if you haven't seen Altered Carbon and want to, you may want to turn this off and listen to another podcast. Not right now. Maybe listen to our first two if you've seen those two movies already. So once again, major disclaimer that there are spoilers ahead, and to switch channels if you don't want to know much about Altered Carbon before actually watching it. But after you're done, come back and see us. So first things first, let's just get an initial feel. What's your initial feel for Altered Carbon, just as a whole, like right first initial thoughts?
For me personally, I'm not a huge fan of kind of cop type shows like CSI, like those type of shows. But I actually did enjoy this one. There wasn't enough police type kind of content to turn me away, so this is one that I actually enjoyed.
Yeah, and see, on the other hand, this is kind of the interesting mix that you and I get. Is I actually like police procedural type shows, but like you say, this one didn't have enough to make it too heavy in that department, right?
It wasn't really a crime drama. It was more just action.
The thing that I had a problem with this, and I always do, is, and I'm not sure if this is the actual term you'd use for it, but dystopian future.
Oh, yeah.
I always have a rough time with the future type things. I'm not sure why, but I'm not a fan of futuristic things.
I find there's a cliche with futuristic things, and this one followed it. I kind of wish they would have veered away from that, because I don't have a problem with it. On the other hand, I enjoy the kind of futuristic, kind of dystopian future shows. But I just wish somebody would have a different vision. It seems like it's always extremely industrial, very, very kind of...
Lots of neon.
Yeah. Lots of kind of sex trade.
Yeah.
Like it seems like everything is a strip club or a brothel or a harem or something.
Yeah.
It kind of always got that feel, like the dirty feel, you know?
Yeah, this did have more of a... like a Blade Runner or a Fifth Element type of feel, as opposed to... I found it seemed... When I first saw it, I thought it's almost like, Coruscant in Star Wars.
Yeah.
It just looked like that, but a dirty Coruscant.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the vibe I got from this, and I'm so with these type of shows. But like you say, it's enough different type of stuff and some cool ideas that it actually comes together, and there's a deep enough storyline to actually make it all work.
Yeah.
So it did work. So I guess we can start off here. At the start, we get to meet who our main protagonist is.
Yeah.
And it's Takeshi Kovacs.
Yeah.
Right?
Although I was kind of confused with this, and maybe you can clarify, because the very opening scene, it's him and this girl in an apartment or hotel room or something.
Yeah.
And they never kind of explain throughout the entire series how he got to that point.
No, they didn't.
He gets shot in there and dies, and he gets put into this new body that is basically the main character throughout the entire series. Yeah. But because they go back at some point to explain some of his origin, but that's the one part that I found that they never explain.
Yeah.
And there's a girl in there with him.
The girl turns out, this is something I actually had to Google because I didn't catch it the first time. Her name is Sarah, and she's actually his partner. So she has really, aside from that, she's got no other bearing on the story.
Okay.
Aside from just being with them, and that's about it.
That was the one thing where they explain a lot of things, and that was kind of one of the opening questions I had that I was like, I don't know where this comes from.
It's odd to begin with. It does start as a bit of a mishmash. Like the first 15-20 minutes are pretty, not confusing, but just it doesn't really come together. And a lot of shows are like that, right? They just throw a lot at you. Because you see the main guy, and we could say that it's Kovacs. So whenever we say Kovacs, it depends on what we're talking about, past or present Kovacs, because he's Asian to start off with. I guess he's Asian Russian. His parents are Asian Russian. That's why he's Takeshi and Kovacs, right?
I didn't know that.
So, and he becomes, and I don't even know what that actor's name is, but he's the guy that was the new RoboCop That's what he was
He was
in.
the Marine guy from Suicide Squad too.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he was
Okay.
the captain or the colonel that they couldn't allow him to die. Remember, he was the kind of team leader.
I didn't see Suicide Squad.
What?
Yeah.
Come on.
But he was in one of the seasons of House of Cards as well.
Yeah,
He
I didn't
was.
watch that.
Oh, okay, we're going nowhere here.
We're not very good friends.
He was in lots of stuff, but he's good though. I don't mind that guy, and he seems like a pretty good actor and everything. So he's actually looks like a big Ziploc baggie to start off with. He's fresh off the. I guess he was just being kept in cryogenic type of thing for 250 years, right? So you're
I mean, not that body specifically, just his stack or whatever they call it, right?
But that body.
Well, no, because Ortega was with them.
You're foreshadowing.
Wow. But Ortega knew that guy, and she's not 250 years old, right?
That's a good point.
So I think his stack was on ice for 250
Oh, yeah,
years,
that's a good point.
They just threw him into that body.
Okay, so just in case you need a little refresher, although it's the main premise of this whole show, is that it's the difference between sleeves and stacks, of which Yan is talking about. So a stack is actually like your memory chip. It's like your brain pretty much for your body. It tucks it handily in a little slot in the back of your neck somehow. And sleeves, so that's stack is your memory, and sleeves are actually your body. A body. It doesn't have to be. There's really no such thing as your body, because there's only a certain type of people that care about one body for one life, and then their stack and their memories are done.
Yep.
And they get into that a little bit later on, but it's people that it almost seems like it's the more religious people. They call them Neo-Catholics. Yeah, so that's what they call them, and Yan mentions Ortega, who is the main cop woman, cop lady, and all this, and she comes from a family that's like that. She doesn't. They don't believe in transposing these bodies. So we find out eventually that he gets hired by a guy named Bancroft. His name is Lawrence. Lawrence.
I think so. Yeah, Lawrence Bancroft.
And he's a douchebag. He's a rich douchebag. Did you ever find out they call them meths? They call them meths. The rich
like the people that live in the sky. There, I don't know what it
upper
means.
Class people are meths. So I'm not sure why they call them meths, because I always think that's someone in the gutter with a needle stuck in their arm. But
the other thing that they said in that opening scene too that didn't really make sense, and maybe you can explain this, but when Kovac wakes up in that guy's body, the first thing he says, because the way the show kind of opens up is Kovac is in his original body, and his hotel room when he's with the girl gets kind of broken into. Well, not broken into, but I guess they're cops or something that come in, and they end up in a big shootout, and he gets shot. And then when he wakes up, it's because his stack got put into this guy's body 250 years later. So the first thing he says when he wakes up is, "I hate being shot." But I got the impression this was the first time his stack was actually pulled out and put into somebody else's body.
Yeah,
because he'd never been shot before, so that was kind of another.
They would just to jump ahead a little bit, but I'm assuming everyone's seen the whole season anyways. Yeah. But they do jump to other planets and outside their bodies when he's with.
That's true, yeah. So maybe.
Yeah. So I guess just to keep this moving along, you find out that Kovac is hired by this rich guy named Bancroft, believe it or not, to solve his own murder. So it really looks like he took his own life. He shot himself in the head or whatnot in pretty much his own house, where he and his wife are the only ones that have access to the guns or whatnot, right? And this is where you kind of get introduced to a lot of different characters that have to do with this, which we'll get to in a little bit. Something I found right off the top with the first couple episodes of this is that I found it almost seemed like the show was trying to, not if it was the directors or whatnot, we're trying to show that we're a mature show. We want to compete with the mature shows. And I just found some of and I'm not opposed to nudity and swearing, but I just found a lot of it felt forced or gratuitous. And that's just the thing.
Yeah, because that kind of ties back into what I was saying earlier, where, it's a futuristic show. Well, there needs to be, sex and drugs literally everywhere. Like, you can't get away from it, right?
Yeah, I guess so. So what it comes down to is that was my initial thought of this. I wasn't totally sold after the first couple episodes. So if you know any, if someone was gonna watch it, I'd recommend they give it a few to let it grow on them.
You know what I found it reminded me of the first episode? So this Kovac guy, going back, like when the reason he was shot originally is because he was something called an envoy, which is a criminal basically. So I don't know why they put him on ice to begin with. Like, why are they storing criminals? Who knows? But then this thing happens 250 years later, and apparently there's nobody alive at that point that can solve the murder. So they actually bring this guy back from the past to help. And as soon as I saw that, the first thing that came to my head was Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. It's kind of the same premise, right? He's a cop from the past who dies and they freeze his body, and then something happens, hundreds of years later, and there's nobody around that could solve the crime except for him. Let's thaw out the guy.
Well, what kind of movie would it be if that wasn't the case, though?
I guess.
Come on. So what it comes down to is that that sets up the plot for the whole movie. The whole show is what it comes down to. So a few things more from a technical aspect. I found the production values for really nice. A lot of it feels really polished, and I found I kept on thinking of the futuristic type effects in Black Mirror. So if you've seen Black Mirror, just how it's always a little further in the future than right now, and how the effects and the doodads and the gadgets are all really well done. I found it's almost like that, except to the next level, because it seemed like any cityscapes, anything that was inside of a room, they did a really good job of really, if it was all green screen, you couldn't tell.
Yeah.
And there was no such thing as just them in some dismal room. Everything seemed nice for some reason. So for a TV show, and I'll call it TV even though it's Netflix I'm not sure I don't know if you call it TV. It's on my TV. I'm playing it. So for a TV show, I found that was really good and really well done.
The one thing that kind of made me laugh is they're in the future, so you'd think that they know better, but everybody still smokes. Like, there's a lot of smoking scenes in there. I couldn't help but chuckle. I'm like, well, really? Although I guess they can just
they
swap
don't care
bodies.
about their bodies.
Yeah, they can just swap bodies.
Now
so
is when you should be questioning why people smoke, not in the future when you could just swap out as easy. Something that I have in my notes here that I thought was really cool, that I'd have liked to have seen more of, but I'm not sure how that he used it, was when Kovac, you see him thinking back to his childhood, and incidentally, it's worth mentioning that he's got this sister that he was young with, and an abusive father, abusive father who wound up killing his mother. So you see all this through flashbacks. May as well summarize them all, because they jump back. They jump back to it. But when he's telling his sister this story about the patchwork man, the animation in that was awesome.
That was
and
really
it was about a 5 or 10 minute kind of animation telling about the patchwork man, and they kind of reference it a little bit later on. But I thought that was awesome.
Yeah.
And
I found it reminded me of which Harry Potter movie was it where they talk about the Deathly Hallows there, and they do that through this weird animation.
Yeah.
I found it reminded me of that, where it's not regular animation. It's kind of like it's got a weird style to it, but it's just well done. Nicely
done. And I actually Googled it. It's Studio AKA who does that. So I had a look on their website, and they actually have nothing along those lines but just some neat animations. So they're a pretty talented studio, just to give them a little shout out. And this doesn't really line up with us going through this, but something I always found I was wondering is, what planet are they on? If for the entirety of this, I'm not sure what planet.
Yeah, that's true, because they do talk about having settled a number of worlds.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed, but I saw more than just one moon sometimes whenever.
Really? I never noticed that.
Yeah, I saw more. But then the funny thing is, and just to let everyone know, we are based in Ottawa, Canada.
Yeah.
I did hear them say Edmonton. So-and-so shipment from Edmonton.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I didn't catch any of those details.
Maybe they're all Canadians. Futuristic Canadians. So we're kind of skipping through the episodes a little bit here, and we get to meet Kovac needs a home base, and he makes the home base the Raven. It's a big fancy kind of old school hotel that reminds me a little bit of if you've ever played the what are those video games? The ones you refused to play that were underwater there.
BioShock.
BioShock. It reminds me.
Scary.
Didn't that hotel remind you of the stuff from BioShock?
Yeah.
Actually, you didn't get past the
opening. Well, I got the
scene
little bubble
with
the kid with swords for hands, and I bailed.
Oh, okay. So you didn't get to see any of the cool the hotels or anything, but this this hotel reminded me of that. It looked to be that from that, almost like not a steampunk, but, and here's the cool thing about it. Do you know where Poe comes from in relation to the Raven?
He's Edgar Allan Poe, right?
Yeah, so that's the cool thing, and they call him like Eddie, they call him Eddie and that and everything, and he was because he even looks like Edgar Allan Poe, so that was the cool thing about that, I thought, and I found he was one of the kind of neater characters in the whole series, right?
And he's completely AI, right?
He's completely AI, and I found that was really cool how they showed him talking to other AIs, who you found out later are representatives of other buildings.
Yeah.
That was the cool thing about that.
And I liked how when he said he was staying at that hotel, everybody kind of just says, "Oh, why would you stay there?" Because they're like, I think at one point they refer to it as a crazy ex-girlfriend, where once you stay there, they have your information and they kind of keep after you and they send ads and they want you to come back as a guest, and I can totally see that.
Yeah, it was just a good idea. Like, and that's the one thing that I give props to this show for, is a lot of neat ideas thrown together that work.
Yeah.
They kind of work, and not everything works, but the majority of these cool ideas really do work. This was about the point, and if we're just going to kind of go back to the actual storyline, he started digging in, and this is where you get to see his kind of slutty-seeming wife. She's uppity and everything like that, and you see her, and, he has a little... Kovac I'm talking about actually fools around with her and everything.
Yeah,
and I
Bancroft's wife, you mean, right?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Kovac doesn't have a wife.
No.
So, but yeah, Bancroft's wife, and she's the typical kind of rich, just lounge around with a champagne glass in your hand type of wife. And I find she's just, her mannerisms in it, I found I was picking her. And I know that these shows try to make you pigeonhole you into seeing someone as the bad guy. Right off the bat, I had a hunch that this is around the point in the show where I thought she did it.
She did it,
yeah. Yeah, that she did it, right? So that I actually have that.
She wasn't innocent, but
in the end, no, and she had a big hand in it. But I just felt like she was the one who did it. She was the one that
pulled the trigger.
Yeah, because she was malicious seeming.
Yeah.
But not enough to be, because you know the bratty son.
Yeah.
You knew the bratty son. It was too obvious, right?
Yeah.
So I guess what. It just really seemed to me like it was his wife, for whatever reason. I'm not sure. It was just a vibe I was getting at this point, right? So, speaking of his wife, the weird thing about this was when they're at a big party. They have a big soiree.
Yeah.
A big soiree at their place. And Kovac follows Bancroft's wife to a room, sees her nailing, like, I think it's her security guard or like something.
Bartender.
And she's acting totally different. And it turns out it's Bancroft's daughter.
Yeah.
Her stack is in the mom's sleeve.
Yeah, because the rich people have all the clones, right? They don't want to have to jump through bodies, so they have the money to just clone themselves. So this particular family just has like vaults full of the same body, and then if one of them dies, they just get transferred into the new. But I guess at this point, their kids are hopping into their parents' bodies, which is kind of weird.
Oh, it's totally weird, because I was going to ask you, would you ever bang anyone in your mom's body?
No.
Because I wouldn't.
No.
So,
and I mean, you have to assume that there's a possibility that your dad would want to kind of like... kind of brush up behind
I'm not mom!
That's like
Although, all the way through, it doesn't seem like Mr. and Mrs. Bancroft care one iota about it. They're sick of each other.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, I guess, the main premise of the show.
Years, right?
Yeah, that's why they...
And did we ever see the daughter?
No.
Because, like, we hear that, I'm the daughter, and I'm in my mom's body, but then I don't remember ever actually seeing the daughter.
No, I don't think so.
We see the bratty son, but...
Yeah, we see him.
And she says at one point she had 21 kids, so where are the other 20 kids?
Did she say that?
Yeah, she said I gave him 21 children.
I can't imagine why. Just every time you see her, she's narding someone else. Yeah, so I guess just to keep it going, here's around the time that we find out about the Elliots. You know, the other family, and he meets, the Elliots are Lizzie, who's trapped in like the AI world. Right. It's the daughter, and Elliot is a guy that Kovac tracks down, thinks that he's the guy that actually killed.
Yeah, because he had
Bancroft.
He had posted a video or something, right? A death threat, but I forget why.
He was just a vengeful father, is what it come down to, because he kind of knew that Bancroft did something to his daughter Lizzie.
Oh, right, that's what it is. Yeah.
And I kind of don't remember because Ava is this guy's wife, and she is no more. But I'm not sure if Bancroft had anything to do
Yeah.
there. But this is where you kind of get introduced to those guys, and Elliot, I'll call him, because I forget what his first name is, but he becomes a buddy and kind of one of the team members
Partner
of Kovac,
almost, yeah.
and even starts living at the Raven and duking it out with Poe, the AI, where they make a deal later on, and Poe kind of rehabilitates Lizzie.
Yeah, because Lizzie's mental state is all, because Lizzie was working as a hooker in one of these harems.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Bancroft would go, and he had like a penchant for strangling hookers, I guess. So he would kind of go there, and they'd get strangled, and then he would pay for them to have a new body.
Yeah.
But she got, I guess, murdered, but her mental state was just completely whacked.
Yeah, I'm not sure why she was just left in the
in her mental dumpster somewhere
where the meths should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the whole deal with those guys. They pop up and they turn out to be a pretty big part of the show. But that was the funny thing, is that right up until about episode 8 or 9, I kept on thinking, what's Lizzie all about,
exactly.
right?
Like,
I don't know how they're going to use her. Yeah, so then just to keep this moving along, so then essentially there's a point where Kovac gets abducted. He gets caught by these guys and tortured.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that was a really great idea. Like we mentioned a while ago, they had put a lot of ideas in.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of them that I just thought, I don't think I've seen it before in anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought this is a genius way to use virtual reality. So what they end up doing is they take your consciousness and they hook you up to a machine. And basically, it's a torture chamber. Like, they go in there and they do anything they want to you.
But not just torture you, but to the point of death.
Yeah, so they can kill you in there, and then they just reboot it, and then you're right back to it. So they had him, like, tied to this table, and they sliced his legs off, and then they shot him in the head.
Put bugs in his skin?
Yeah, put
lizard
bugs in his skin. Then he'd just reboot, and he would be wake back up on the table again, and then they'd set fire to him.
Oh, you know what I liked from that part? The guy they got as their main torture guy there, you only see him for about an episode. He's one of the what are they called from Dirk Gently? The Ravenous 3 or the...
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, one of those guys.
One of those psychos in the van there.
Yeah. And he looked exactly the same.
Yeah.
Like the bleach beard and everything. I find I really dig that guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you only had him for an episode. So what it comes down to is that guy was actually double-sleeved. There's a new term we learned with that guy, and he was a guy that was double-sleeved. But the funny, and he was Dimitri.
Dimmy the twins.
Turns out that earlier on, Kovac whacks him. Or actually, I think it's more like the Raven. So the hotel and Poe whack him. But he keeps on saying, "You killed my brother. You killed my brother." But it turns out it's only a clone of himself. His brain is cloned and his stack is cloned, which is a kind of a cool concept, but I don't know. I have a rough time keeping one conscious body afloat, let alone two.
That's kind of the one thing that I found with this show is it's a neat concept, being able to just transfer your consciousness. But I found they introduced almost too many different variations of it. Like they said, they have this thing called true death, where if you actually blow the chip in your neck, then you can't be revived. But then they introduced this double sleeving where you can clone your chip, and then there's basically two of you. Mm-hmm. And then later on they get into casting, which is where you just kind of over the Wi-Fi network just project your consciousness into another body, and then
it's like a Google or Chromecast.
Yeah. So at that point I'm thinking, why would you ever put your actual chip into a body? Why wouldn't you just always cast somewhere else?
Yeah.
So I found there was almost too many variations of it. They should have just stuck with one way to do it.
Yeah. And I guess this is around when the point where he's getting tortured. That's when you start hearing the name Riker. That's when you start finding out about Riker, and this Dimitri's asking about Riker and all this stuff, right? And this was a part I actually got pretty confused. I wasn't sure what was going on. It doesn't take much to confuse me, but this is the point where it got confusing. Also, around this time, you see a lot of Ortega, which is the female cop. And she was okay, but you know what I found with her? She acted really tough, and I wasn't buying it.
Yeah.
I couldn't buy her as tough as people were making her out to be in the show.
Even with her bionic arm.
That's later on, man. You're foreshadowing.
We're not following this sequentially.
I am to a T. So the one of my favorite parts of this whole entire series happens right around this time, is when
He gets his unicorn backpack.
yes and no, but where Ortega has like this family event at home. I think it's around Day of the Dead or whatnot, and has her grandmother's stack put into the big bald biker guy.
Dude, yeah.
And he is hilarious. Like, he's awesome. He winds up, actually, I think Dimitri winds up in him too.
Inside of him, yeah.
But whoever that actor was, that was that biker.
That was great.
He deserves.
Because playing a Mexican grandma and then going back, or starting with a biker, mean biker.
Yeah, because he was just cursing and spitting.
To Mexican grandma, to gangster.
But Russian.
Yeah,
Russian accent.
Gangster.
So he was really funny in that, and I really, because even he's cursing, oh, I'm standing up to pee.
Yeah.
And then the kids are giggling at the Thanksgiving table and whatnot. Around this time too, you get introduced to another character who is Kel, and that's she's the leader of the Envoys, which is that resistance kind of group.
We saw her right from.
You saw her, but you didn't really know what her name was.
Pretty much any time Kovac was having a hard time or an emo moment, he would hallucinate and talk to her. But yeah, we never really know who that was.
Here's where you find out that she was actually training them to overcome a lot of different things, almost like resistance type fighters or whatnot.
Well, she reveals that she's the one that invented the stacks, right? She's the one that found the technology and created the stacks, and then she realized, it's a mistake. So that's where she created these resistance people to say, hey, this is wrong. Humans aren't meant to live for hundreds of years. So she started training these fighters to show them how to fight it and basically get rid of it, go back to living the old way.
Yeah, she meant it as a good thing, and they didn't know, and you don't know all the way through this whole thing that she's the one that actually pretty much started all this.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing too is that you find out eventually that Envoy, as that group, and their main plan is to make it so rich people can't just keep buying clones or sleeves and keep on living the high life for years and years and centuries and everything like that. And what her plan is to do is to pretty much put 100-year limit on all stacks, so no one, no matter what, even if you go through a bunch of bodies, your stack won't live more than 100 years, which would have been great.
Yeah.
Good plan, everything like that. So that's where you meet her, and she turns out to eventually being closer to the end, turns out to be a pretty big part of this whole thing, right? Once again, as you pointed out, this is where you meet the unicorn backpack full of weapons.
Unicorn backpack, yeah.
Now, here's a question for you. Where does that come from? Does he just go and buy it?
I don't think he buys it. I think he finds it somewhere.
Yeah.
And he just stores his stuff in there, and then he keeps it for everything. Like, he's always putting his guns in there.
It's pretty solid.
Well, I mean, I'm looking on Amazon right now to get myself one.
He actually is. So this is also the spot around when he's getting tortured that you find out that the police, CTAC, the police, they're actually tracking him. They've got a tracker implanted on him, and through this torture, they actually extract that from him. So he's no longer being watched by Ortega and her cronies right at the PD. Mm-hmm. So that's where we kind of get into the whole Riker thing, and we find out that Riker is actually a guy that Ortega used to be involved with, even to the point of living with them and this and that, and he actually owned the sleeve that Kovac is in.
So so that was actually his body, and then you realize why Ortega cared so much, because at first you're thinking, why does she care about this random, henchman that was hired by a rich guy? But she's following this guy around, she's caring about his every move. So you actually find out that she cares more about the actual body and not the dude that's inside, because she's hoping that her boyfriend is going to come back, put his stack back into his body.
Do you think it's the whole body, or do you think certain parts?
Well, probably just certain parts. She probably paid a lot of money to put a bionic version on there.
So around this point here is also where you get introduced to Fight Drome, which is probably my favorite episode of this whole darn thing. And it seems to be an area, and almost like, and I guess it's good that it happens around midway through the season, because it's kind of where the plot really comes into play. It seemed like the first 5 episodes were setting you up with the pieces, the chess pieces, and then it seems like the end of this whole Fight Drome part. So Fight Drome is obviously, not to get into detail, because I'm assuming you guys have watched it, right? So is like a Fight Club.
Yeah,
It's like
pretty
Fight
much.
Club.
And it's run by an AI, so same as Poe,
Oh,
right?
cool thing about that AI with the spiky hair and the blue eyes. And you're probably way too young to remember this, but Max, you ever hear of Max Headroom?
No.
And he's a computerized guy in the box, and no, he was big in the 80s, trust me. So
I was in my dad's testicles in the 80s. So.
Yeah, so Yan didn't see much of the 80s. But anyway, the guy that plays him, I don't know what his name is, but he actually played Max Headroom, and it's just one of those things where if you're my age, you probably recognize the voice right away. Like, it was one of those things where I was like, that's got to be him. So anyway, so yeah, this AI, and his name is Carnage. His name is Carnage, that AI. He actually runs like a big fight club, and it's this underground, of course, once again, seedy underground, right? And it's complete with chain link fences around the ring and everything. And so they wind up, it's a big scene, and I'm not going to go into detail with it, but eventually, obviously, Kovac and Ortega wind up in the ring. And here's the weird thing about this scene, and I don't know if you noticed this. Mutants. What was with the mutants?
Yeah, exactly.
In there?
They didn't explain it.
It was one guy looked like the Rhino from
exactly.
Spider-Man.
So no idea what was going on there, but
but they didn't talk about mutants before. Well, they showed one frozen in a case when they first went to this fight film, but then they didn't talk about it.
You don't know, like, are they from one of the other worlds?
They must be.
Or are they just people that had bionic rhino horns attached to their faces? Who knows? Like,
incidentally, it's during this Fight Drome that they mentioned Edmonton.
Oh, really?
Maybe that was their representation. Those are Canadians. The mutants are Canadians. So, yeah, what it winds up being is that this is around the episode where you find out, they're getting beat up pretty much.
Yep.
Kovac is down and out, and you see, I thought it looked like a really ninja-y Kylo Ren coming in.
Oh, no.
Down the ramp, and she's samurai sword out, and she's hacking and slashing all the way through. And she pulls off her hood, and at this point, I didn't clue in who it was, but the only way I recognized her was when they'd flash back to the Envoy training camps. I recognized her from that, right? Yep. She was the one with the tattoo on her forehead.
Yeah. So she was one, like, at this point, you kind of figure, oh, she's just one of his Envoy classmates, basically. She trained with him. Yeah,
so this is where you kind of start to realize that these backstories with his sister are a big deal with the whole storyline. And mixed in here too there's some subplots. Like, you find out that Bancroft and his son, like, there's a whole kind of separate little tie-in there that.
Well, that's the whole reason they went to that fight club. Right? Yeah. It was just they saw a video of Bancroft there with his son. So there's a lot of little details, but.
But even then, you find out he suspects Isaac, who is Bancroft's son, might have had something to do with it, because he did actually jump into some of his dad's cloned bodies, who he was generating on his own, right?
Yeah.
But it turned out it was just to do CD art deals and this and that, so it turned out to be a dead end. Yeah, he was trying to show that he was a cool dude to his dad, but his dad didn't give a crap about anything.
Yeah, because he wanted
killing hookers.
Well, he wanted to get his dad's acceptance because he was gay, right?
Is that the only reason?
Yeah, because he figured his dad would never accept him, so he's like, I want to show you that I can do this stuff. I'm smart enough. I can run the business.
Oh, I see. I missed that part. So that's about midway through, and then if we're keeping on going here, we realize that obviously that Isaac didn't do it. It was a total dead lead and everything like that. And there's you start to find out who the main pieces are as far as things go, who's actually looking for Kovac and everything like that. So you start to really get the feel for that Dimitri guy is part of that group that's looking for him, and is even in. It looked like, is it an older version of Kovac? Kovac's old body that he's in.
Yeah, not his old body, but it's. I guess they grew him. They found some of his DNA, and they had a new.
Is it me, or did it not totally look like him? Or
no, it didn't really look like. Yeah, it was slightly different.
It was like another Asian guy. Yeah. It wasn't the same guy, I think.
This might sound kind of racist, so let's move on.
Okay. Now, one thing we also find out here too is the fact that we hear the term the pipe. The pipe is almost like the web for consciousness or whatnot. That's where Lizzie, if we're going back, Elliot is actually trapped in the pipe. So whenever they go in, it's almost like the VR world that they go and have a look in the pipe, right? So that's also where, You got anything about the pipe?
No.
No, okay. No
I like how they watch Lizzie on this really old school TV though. Like I like how there's no modern day. Like it's either if you're gonna do, it's gonna be like super futuristic TV or like 1950s TV. Like there's no 2018 flat screen TVs.
It's almost like the Matrix using like dial-up phones.
Yeah, exactly.
To
So you got to go either way back or way in the future.
Yeah. Wow. And you know what? Now that I mentioned the Matrix, didn't certain aspects of this remind you of the Matrix as well? Like the consciousness and going in and out and everything like that?
Except you can die in your consciousness and not in the Matrix.
That's true. So this is also around the time that, and they flash back to their childhood quite often, but you also find out that he killed his dad, that Takashi or Kovacs killed his dad, and soon after that, that's when he was recruited by SeaTac. So recruited
so he was
by
a
the
cop
police,
for a while,
which left his sister to an orphanage. So that you kind of get that intel there, and then we get to episode 7, which is a long one.
Yeah,
it's the long one.
It's a complete flashback one.
It's a flashback, and the good news about it is it's a pretty cool episode, and it really sure does fill in a lot of blanks. Up to now, and you find out a lot of stuff there, and I'm not going to dwell too much on it, but what jumped out at you? What are the main talking points as far as that episode goes?
Well, I never realized he was a cop. Like, I didn't realize he was part of SeaTac.
Okay.
I'd always just thought he was an envoy, whatever that meant.
Yep.
And was a criminal, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that he started out as a cop was kind of news to me in that episode.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then the funny thing is, he's there and he's all on a mission and everything like that, and then he's set to pop this certain guy.
The Yakuza leader.
Yeah, he's a Yakuza.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that, hey, where'd you get that necklace? He sees where Ray,
the ninja girl that saved him from Fight Club.
Yeah, so you start putting things together that this is actually someone he knows, and it's actually his sister, right? And together they actually just run. One's running from the Yakuza, and the other one's running from SeaTac, so they're both on the lam. And this is how this Kel, who I mentioned before, brings them to the envoy.
Yeah, so she kind of recruits them into her secret club.
Yeah, so interesting point. And this series is actually based on 3 books.
Okay.
I checked that out. And if anyone is looking to read the books, maybe just click the podcast off now, because I'm going to mention something that's spoily in the books. But something that's interesting that's in the books is that Envoy isn't any type of resistance. They're actually there's no battling with it. So it's not like they're a resistance type group at all in the books, from what I heard. I didn't read the books. I just kind of got a summary.
I didn't know there were books.
There you go.
We're learning lots of stuff. Did they ever mention the tree? Because remember when he first goes to Bancroft's house, there's that big weird tree in the lobby, and he's like, "Oh, I thought these were, extinct." And she's like, "Oh, these are artifacts." And then when you go to the flashback where he's training to be an envoy, there's that tree again. They call it, it's like a soul spire or something like that, right? But they don't really ever mention why that's important.
They don't mention that at all.
No.
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't catch any of that.
They refer to it as it's sounding like it's important or it's some kind of fancy
like
tree.
The tree of life in
Avatar.
Yeah.
And nobody plugs their hair into this thing.
No, it doesn't really have much to do.
No, but they mention it like it's a big important thing. Like,
because he even tracks it down. Tree. That's around the time that they see the roots on a rock.
Yeah.
And they see it bubbling through.
Exactly.
Look at how what'd you call it? The Soul
Spire? I think it's Soul Spire.
We must follow this or something, right?
And then when he's at Bancroft's, he's like, "Oh, they used to grow to be this big." He's like, "Yeah, I've seen them before." So anyways.
Yeah. So what it comes down to, this episode gives you a bunch of backstory there, and shows you that at first they're outcasts in this group, and then slowly but surely they gain their trust and go on missions and all this, and then Kovacs winds up risking his life for Kel. They fall in love. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
Aww.
And then, essentially, you kind of find out that their whole camp is poisoned with a virus. And then Ray, who's his sister, and Kel get blown up in a spaceship. So pretty much, Kovacs in a whole smash of ash, getting hunted by the police, with no one else left. Came down to.
This is where it kind of didn't make sense to me, because he ends there. He's got no way off that rock. Like, he's on this planet or wherever they are, pretty much everybody in his team died. But then it starts out, the whole series starts out where he's in an apartment with a girl. But so that's still kind of a plot hole to me. Like, how did he get off that planet?
That's going to be another. It's
that's
going to be like
2.
Yes, that's going to be it. I'm so looking forward to that. So then you find out, this is around the time that you find out that his sister is, obviously you know that because she just saved them from the fight drome.
Yeah.
But his sister survived the explosion.
Yeah.
So she came up with some.
Well, she backed herself
story.
up, right?
Yeah, but she came up with some bull Rory kind of story to begin with, right?
Oh yeah, that somebody
some passersby found a
remnants
my toenail.
In a stack, yeah.
Yeah. So then you find out, and you kind of start realizing that his sister isn't all she's pretending to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to really find it starts to really unravel, and this is when you get into the whole, Act 3 of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Is you find out that his sister is pretty much a loon, and she set up pretty much everything.
She's not a loon. She just loves her family.
Dude, you're not supposed to love your brother like she talks about him.
Well, yeah.
Honestly, the way she'd talk about him, it was like.
But it was her only family.
Dude, it's like, we're finished. We're finished. We're not seeing each other anymore. And she was the one that was like, but can I call you? it was.
She was that crazy ex-girlfriend.
Except your sister's not supposed to act like a crazy ex-girlfriend.
Maybe your sisters don't. But.
So this is where you start to understand that she pretty much put Bancroft, or kind of pulled the strings to make Bancroft thaw out her brother, and that was to get him thawed out and under police custody.
All part of her master plan.
That was it. And you start to realize at this point that she has everything to do with even some things that you'd seen in the past, like the torture chamber. She had a hand in inventing that, and there's this like a crazy kind of house of ill repute in the sky called Head in the Clouds.
The harem.
And she had a hand in that. That's always tied in because of the blonde girl that fell from the sky there. So, which I didn't mention, but we don't need to because you guys have seen this, right?
Exactly.
So I'm not spoiling anything. Then you just find out that, and her name is Ray. Oh, you gotta Raylene.
Ray.
Good old Raylene.
That didn't make sense to me. Like, her whole harem in the sky.
Yeah.
I don't get why that's such a... Like, the whole premise of it is for guys that like to kill hookers, I guess, basically. So you'd go there, and you would do whatever you wanted with the hookers, and you would end up killing them.
It's not so much just killing hookers. It's because it's
people... It's their final death, right? Like, that's the thrill they get.
Yeah, so they didn't... Yeah.
I don't get that. Like, why... I mean, maybe it's just because I'm not a psycho, but, like...
Don't kill me by the end of this podcast. We've got millions and millions of listeners.
You're not a hooker,
witnesses.
So you're good. Or are you? No, but like that's the whole thing. Like where Lizzie works, right? Where that's the reason she's all psycho now, because she would go there and people would strangle her to death, and then they would just take her stack out and put it in a new body, and you keep hooking, right?
Yeah.
But this place, the whole attraction is that they tell the hookers that they're going to get re-sleeved, but they actually get killed for real.
Because they got bored. The meths who are the rich people, I find meths is a bad name.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you think meth head, right?
That's it.
Well, I mean, if they're killing hookers for fun, maybe they are meth heads.
But the thing is, keep in mind that the meths, let's say they've been alive for 300 years. They've had all the sex, all the drugs. They've killed temporary kills, let's say, of people.
Yeah.
And they've restacked or whatever they think about it, in 250 years, a lot of the stuff you do right now you probably wouldn't be doing because you'd be bored to tears with it, whether it's recording podcasts or drinking beers
or killing hookers.
Yeah. So you'd be bored with it. So what this thing is it makes it less boring because, and this is where we get to introduce this term, because you actually get to real death somebody. Yeah. So you real death someone, it's more of a thrill than just sleeve killing them, let's say.
Like I said, maybe it's just because I'm not psycho enough, but I don't get...
Well, you're psycho. Let's keep this straight.
I said
not
enough,
that psycho.
Enough.
Yeah. So here's this term, real death, and I find they could have come up with something better. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
In True Blood, they call it the true death. Whenever.
See, and that seems better than real death. Like
real
even
death.
at the Fight Club. Real death, real death. actually yelling real death. But what killed me is I found it just seemed funny. But when they're speaking just normally like this here, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're gonna real death somebody," and they use it as a verb, right? Oh, he got real death.
Oh no.
They put it like I even looked at the subtitles and they actually put apostrophe D, real death. Duh. I don't know, that was just one of those things, right? So we find out eventually that Raylene pretty much gives him an ultimatum, says she can't be killed because she's got $1 bajillion. She's a meth, is what it comes down to.
And that's the other thing we didn't really cover is these rich people have like these backups, right? So
you mentioned that earlier.
Did I mention it earlier?
And tons of clones, tons of backups.
Well, the clones, but they actually back up as they go to like the satellite.
They blink their eyes.
Yeah, they blink their
like
eyes.
Having a little seizure.
They're all good to go.
Yeah, so she's got infinite backups and everything like that, so they know they can't actually kill her straight up as killing someone normally or whatnot. So she pretty much is pulling all the strings, gets them to frame another person, because now that she's got what she wanted, which is Kovac in the flesh in front of her, she pretty much just wants them to make this Bancroft kind of whole case go away. So she's saying, I don't care how you do it, just sew it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is around the time, unfortunately, in this whole ruse to kind of get rid of this whole case that they're on and drop all that. This is where we see Poe actually. Does he die?
Gets deleted.
Yeah, but he gets deleted, and I was thinking, because if there is a second season of this, you can't really bring an AI
Why
back.
wouldn't you bring back up a hotel though? It seems like poor
It's not
planning.
used very much though. Well, how many hotels around here are backed up? So Poe actually dies, and I was thinking, well, that sucks. I think he might have been maybe my favorite character in the whole show, right? So you find that, and then there's a funny scene around this time that I have to bring up is when Ortega's kind of doing her own investigation, and she comes upon this room full of cryogenically frozen Raylene clone bodies, and she's fighting all of them one at a time, and Raylene is pretty much in as many clothes as she was born with, is what it comes down to.
As many clothes as I'm wearing right now.
No. But she is quite bare bum.
Yep.
And it's full on, like, it's pretty much like the Matrix, you know, when he's fighting all the Agent Smiths, except bare bum Agent Smiths is what it comes down to. And while I don't have a problem with that, here's the interesting thing about it. Not once was that scene bad naked. You know, Seinfeld, they talk about when his girlfriend's opening a pickle jar and everything's tightening up. It's not bad naked at all. Somehow that scene wasn't bad naked, but I'm just glad the kids didn't come in during that, because there's a whole lot of...
Because you were busy doing...
No, nothing like that. There's just a whole lot of dead,
scene,
bare bum, same gal is all.
What I found kind of funny with that scene is that Raylene, when you see her in Fight Drone, she takes out like an entire club of mutant Canadians with a katana.
Yeah.
And this one, basically this one Ortega chick fights about 8 of them, and she even had her sword with her, and she got killed on every single time.
It comes down to what I was saying before, though, where for some reason they had Ortega so badass in this series. Now, she did have her electronic arm at this point.
And a gun, but still.
But yeah, still. Because, But see, that's exactly what I mean. Like, Ortega, I just didn't read that she was that badass in any part of this. She was cool and good actress and everything, so it wouldn't take anything out, but I just find she didn't come off that badass. No. Maybe if everything on her was robotic, maybe. That would have been cool. So I guess that's about it for that part. Something else I wanted, since we're mentioning houses of ill repute and whatnot, something I thought was funny was the bar named Prick Up.
See, I didn't even see that one.
No.
I saw the jacket bar. That's where Lizzie
That was funny too, though.
The jacket.
Yeah. So I like that they do that. So now we're kind of getting into the real end of things here, and you know, Ortega gets beat up, and they actually have her stacked. They're torturing her, everything like that. She's kind of a little bit of a put to the side, you know, that type of thing. And not to mention her whole family gets killed.
Yeah.
They whack her whole family
with the kids. Did we really need that close-up shot of the cat and of the police there barfing, and
No.
it seemed like it stayed on it, and you could see the barf like drool just hanging on
And
his
has he
lips.
not seen stuff like that before?
Like, yeah, like, come on, dude.
They must have to wipe up dead clones all the
Yeah.
time. Dead hooker clones.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's seen. I guess it's the fact that it's kids this time.
Maybe.
And they showed those kids dead way too many. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. Because then
Although
she
at least they just showed their legs. Like, we
although
see
that was
everything.
part of her torture was the fact
Yeah,
that
she just kept reliving that scene.
that'd be bad torture too.
Yep.
But yeah, they whacked her whole family. I'm not sure why they had to whack her whole family in the grand scheme of things, except for the torturing part of it. But
Well, I think the plan was to just get rid of her, right?
yeah. So we get to kind of the final conclusion, which is them with this big plot to go up to Head in the Clouds, which is the hooker house up in the sky, and this is totally owned by Ray, and it's just a plan to go and take her out at a certain point.
Well, they wanted to put a virus in her backups.
Yeah.
So they corrupted pretty much all of her backups, but they needed to get conveniently close to her and
yeah.
do stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, although it seems like there should be more to say about this, it seemed pretty,
Yeah.
like I say, final act-ish for a typical, not so much a TV show, it felt more like a final act for a movie,
Yeah.
I found. But you know what, speaking of that, I found by the end of this, although at the start it didn't sell me that well and it took me a bit to get into it, I found by the time it was concluding, I found it felt more like an epic movie kind of trilogy ending as
Yeah.
opposed to a TV show ending. I don't know if it felt like that to you. I don't know if it was just because of visually how it was or
Yeah,
whatnot,
maybe,
but
yeah.
it just felt epic for some
Mhm.
reason. And I don't mean epic in the sense like of Lord of the Rings,
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. I just find it felt more than a TV series to
Yeah,
me by
for
the
sure.
end of it for some reason. So in the end, they overcome her. Raylene
Yeah.
is brought to her mercy. I forget, did they kill her?
Yep.
They kill her,
He
right?
shoots her in the neck after they killed all her backups.
Yeah. You shoot someone in the neck, eh?
Right in the neck.
Right in the neck. Yeah, that's true because that's one of the threats is they said we iced all your other clones,
Yeah.
all your other backups. It's just you.
This is your last.
This
life,
is your
basically.
This is your 9th life there,
Yeah.
kitten. So then
And the other thing I just thought of is Lizzie at that point is also on that.
she's
ship.
friggin' like
But
Kill Bill mode.
Well, that's the thing is like, so she was in this old school 50s TV. Her mentality was just going there and learning how to fight for some reason. But how I said earlier, you know how they introduced, okay, you can re-sleeve, just pull your actual stack out. Then they have backups. Then you have casting, and then so now they've just introduced this other thing. She's a synthetic.
That's it. A
So
synth.
she's
they call her a
a
synth.
yeah. So she's just a human body that could shapeshift.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, why do you need sleeves?
Why
then?
do that?
Just
I
get
totally
a
thought that
synthetic,
too.
like-
Why not do that all
Yeah.
along? And why didn't? Well, even for that matter. So, well, I guess okay. I was gonna say Ortega. Why didn't she just get clones of Riker's body?
yeah.
But because she's one of
Well,
the ones
she's-
that believes in one body, one lifetime. I
Well,
guess
she
that's
doesn't though.
Why. Eh?
Her family does. She doesn't.
Are
Because
you sure?
that's why she re-sleeved her grandma and brought her grandma. Remember, then her mom was all
Yeah,
disapproving.
but for herself, because remember they're like,
she's not.
no, right?
She's not Neo-C, no.
So confusing.
She just wanted to keep her body.
That's the one thing with this show, and what I did appreciate is that it's so many different, interesting ideas.
Yeah.
And like I say, some of them work, or
Mhm.
most of them work.
Yeah.
Some of them don't, right?
Yeah.
It's almost yeah. So I guess we can kind of start wrapping this up. So then what happens is that everything's all good. Raylene's shot in the neck. Whorehouse in the sky's down.
Yeah.
And Riker is actually helping Ortega move Riker's stuff in, I guess, to the house, and he's looking to give Riker back his body, is from what it seems like, while
Yeah.
he goes and moves on to Greener Pastures season 2, perhaps. I guess we didn't really touch on that. Bancroft actually wound up killing himself in the end.
Yeah. So it turns out he killed himself because he impregnated Lizzie.
Yeah.
And then Lizzie came up to get money or something, and then the wife kicked her stomach for a while, and
Which comes down to what I said. Like I said, around episode 3, I had a hunch the wife
yeah.
did it, though. She
Yeah.
didn't do it,
She just
but she was very
just
much
gave
involved.
Ray the cards she needed to convince Bancroft to do stuff. Right?
Yeah, yeah. You know what scene, and this is kind of jumping back, but do you have anything to add more as far as the
Not
actual
really.
plot goes? A scene that really confused me was, I'd say, in the first quarter or so of the season, is when he was in that almost looked like an airline hangar, and all those kids that supposedly had a virus were in there, and he's being good to them. Bancroft, I'm talking about, is good to them. He's handing out rations, this and that, and then Kovac goes up, starts talking to him, and within like 30 seconds, he goes from normal face to friggin' like zombie man or whatnot. And then he winds up. It seems like he winds up dying.
He does, yeah.
Is that just a clone of his?
Yeah, so it's just like he was casting into that clone, and they never really. I don't think they explained what that disease was.
Yeah.
But I know like they couldn't touch anybody. But I think that was just Bancroft trying to do like Good Samaritan stuff, kind of give back to the community. And I don't know why that disease started, what kind of plague it is, but basically that's it. Like when it affects you, you just die.
Yeah.
So he sends one of his clones in.
It seems like just one of those, almost like the tree. It seems like one of those storylines that was thrown in there from the books.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
not perfectly explained, right?
Yeah.
Like just one of those things. Speaking of the books, and this is where I'll give a disclaimer that I'm going to talk about the books. We haven't read them. Probably won't. I don't see myself reading the books on this. It doesn't entertain me as enough to actually read a few books. But if you're interested in reading the books, just kind of skip to the end or press pause or rewind or whatever now. But so a couple of things that are interesting that I read an article that said things that were really different between the season and the books. In the books, Raylene wasn't even his sister.
Oh, really?
And when I saw that, I thought that explains a lot.
That explains all the sexual tension. It's not incest.
That is, right? So then but I guess that's why they needed those backstories. So you'd wonder if in the books she's not his sister. There's a whole lot of original backtracking. You know, the nice scenes of him and his young sister, where he came from, all that stuff. You'd wonder. So, if anything, I'd read the books just to be curious to see how they did that instead.
It's probably because they just wanted to build a bigger emotional connection between the characters.
Well, because when you make it incestuous seeming.
Well,
for her, anyways, not so much. He was like, dude, space here.
I'm gonna real death you if you don't get off my lap right now.
Yeah. And the other thing too. So there were just 3 things that stood out in this list. There was a list of like 16 things, but I just picked out 3 that were really big.
Okay.
Another one is that Kel, who obviously was huge and was with Kovac the whole time, to the point where they were lovers, to the point where this season even ended with him going to find her, right? Because that's how this season ends, is him going to look for her. In the books, Kel and Kovac didn't know each other at all.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know how they dance around that, but that seems like a big thing in the season.
Because they just invented 2 love stories then?
I guess
brother and sister, and then
so he's just a complete loner through the whole thing.
Wow.
And the other thing that I guess it's not as impactful as the first 2 things, but in the books, Poe didn't exist, so that AI didn't exist at all.
Okay, so it was just a hotel.
I guess
an abandoned hotel.
I don't know. So, but the thing is, if you think about it, there are certain times when Poe pulled some strings.
Yeah.
You know, and then did some pretty major things.
Like, well, I mean, he's the one who trained Lizzie, right? He got her.
That's a good point.
Again.
So Yeah. So, like I say, if I went back and read the books, it'd be just to say, oh, this is different. This is different. But I'm sure we'd find out a lot more about, like you say, the tree.
Yeah.
What do you call it? Soul Spire.
Soul Spire. Yeah. Maybe.
Interesting.
I could be making that term up.
I think he probably is. Yeah. So. Overall, you go ahead and just give me an overall. I know we touched on it to begin with, but it's a little different when you...
I actually enjoyed it. Like I said when I started this thing, that I'm not huge on cop shows, and there was a lot of kind of detective-y...
Sometimes CSI-ish.
Yeah, CSI-ish. Yeah. You know, like, oh, we have this camera, whatever. So I'm not a big fan of that. But the overall story kind of kept me interested enough to keep watching.
Yeah, and I found visually it was nice as far as an actual TV series goes. Netflix did a good job. I found the acting in it was really good. Yep. I didn't get pulled out by bad acting at any point. Like I say, I found they were trying to prove that they were a mature HBO type show a little too much to begin with, but they laid off of it a little bit.
They did have a well-balanced nudity. There was as much male as female nudity.
Yes, to keep both genders
Yeah.
all genders pretty much as happy as possible. So yeah, and yeah, just I'd recommend it to someone. It was a good watch and a good way to burn about 10 hours or so.
Yep.
There's worse stuff on Netflix. Let's
yeah.
put it that way. So I guess we'll wrap this up. Did you want to go ahead and give it a rating out of 5?
I'm gonna give it 3.5 unicorn backpacks out of 5.
Nice. I'm gonna give it let's say 3.75 Takeshi Kovacs clones.
Start
out
your
of
rating
5.
over.
3.75 Takeshi Kovacs clones out of 5.
That's like
That's
a
what I
tongue
give
twister.
it. Yeah. So once again, we are the Geek Philosophers. I'm Bill.
I'm Yan.
And that's Yan. And we hope to hear you next time when we throw a few more of these reviews and podcasts. And we'll talk to you next time.
Boom.